Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on understanding workforce digital skills. My name is Jason. I'm one of the Digital Inclusion Development Officers here at SCVO. For anyone that doesn't know SCVO, we are the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations. So we're the national membership body for Scotland's voluntary sector. The team that I work within, the digital inclusion team, focuses on how we support organisations like yours to make the most out of digital, supporting your service users to get online in a way that works for them. So today's focus is going to be more about your staff and volunteers, the people that work within your organisation, and what we can do to support them with their digital skills. So we'll record the webinar right up until the questions at the end, and then stop the recording so we've got that space for discussion. If you do have any questions, please just pop them in the chat and we can come to them later. But not just any questions, any observations that you have, any thoughts that you have as we move through. But just to really make the most of that Zoom chat, it would be great if you could just stick in there, first off, who you are, which organisation you're with, and what brings you here today. What is it you're hoping to get out of today? That would be great for us to know. But just while you're doing that, a kind of an overview of what it is that I'm hoping that we'll cover today. First off, what is it that we mean by workforce digital skills? So what are workforce digital skills, and what do they look like in Scotland in 2023? But also, what are the challenges faced by the workforce? So if we know that not all staff have those workforce digital skills, what are the reasons behind that? And what are the challenges that we need to be aware of? And lastly, how can we take practical steps towards upskilling? So what is it that we can do next after we've had this discussion to start thinking about upskilling the people within our organisations? So that's really what I'm hoping that we'll all take away from today. But firstly, a little bit of context and a little bit of background in terms of what skills look like across the UK. So across the UK, we have a significant issue with our workforce digital skills. There's a lot of data that sits behind this. There's a great piece of research, which I'll send out with the notes after this webinar, by Lloyds Banking Group and Future.now, that looked at the skills gap across the UK and tried to understand where exactly the issues were. But what it told us was that, first off, 59% of people don't have all of the skills that they need for work. When I say all of the skills that they need for work, I mean they don't have all of those digital skills that they need for a modern workplace. What's even more striking than that is that 8% of people don't have any of the digital skills that they need for work. So they're completely locked out of these new digitized workplaces. A really interesting one, and one that I hope that we'll reflect on a little bit further, is that 18 to 24-year-olds have a poorer grasp of the essential digital skills for work than 25 to 34-year-olds. So this is demonstrating that experience is playing a role in terms of workplace digital skills, but it's also telling us that education and schools aren't doing enough to support people into work. 1.6 million people who are not currently in work don't have any digital skills for work. This means they're at a double disadvantage. So not only are they currently out of the workplace, they are increasingly locked out of our digitized workplaces as well. And lastly, 23% of charities say that their safeguarding skills are poor. So despite more charities moving things online, the skills that exist within those organisations to support people to access that and keep them safe while they aren't actually there. So that's some of the key data that sits behind our understanding of workplace digital skills and what that means for people. But what are we actually talking about when we're talking about workplace digital skills? So we're referring to what is called essential digital skills for work. So these are the skills that are needed to safely benefit from, participate in, and contribute to the digital world at work. To put that simply, essential digital skills for work are the standard set of skills that we all need to do our jobs effectively. So these are, the best way to think about these are as the building blocks that we can use to develop more sophisticated skills on top of. essential digital skills for work are absolutely irrelevant to everybody in your organization, and that is from the front line to the boardroom. But I suppose the question that comes from that is, why bother investigating and investing in workforce digital skills? What is it that makes them so important? Well, as we've just seen from that data, from those key figures earlier, the digital skills gap in the UK is enormous. It's very, very clear in our workplaces. If we're not supporting our staff and volunteers to upskill, then we are at risk of leaving not just them, but our own organisations behind. You have to think about it in the context of Scotland as well. So most of Scotland's businesses and voluntary organisations are small to medium enterprises. So they have less than 50 staff in the case of voluntary organisations. Most organisations have less than 50 staff. Organisations of this size are traditionally less likely to invest in upskilling. So not only is this damaging for the economy as a whole, but it's also it's a risk factor in terms of our ability to be resilient and cope with change. And talking of change as well, we talk about how quickly technology changes. So the systems and the technologies that we use for work, they all move so fast. The goalposts are constantly changing. So the bare minimum that you need to be able to do to keep up to date with work is constantly changing. So if we're going to keep that competitive edge as organizations, but not just as organizations, as employers as well, it's really important that we create that culture of continuous learning in our organizations. But lastly, and possibly quite importantly, or if not most importantly, is that without these key skills, without these essential digital skills, organizations are leaving themselves open to cybersecurity concerns. So there are lots of reasons to invest in upskilling, and there are many, many different ways to do it as well. But it's really important to understand what we actually mean by essential digital skills. What are those digital skills? That's where this comes in handy. So this is the Essential Digital Skills Framework. Essential digital skills outline 5 skills that everybody needs to navigate the internet, and you can see them on our wheel here. You've got communicating, transacting, handling information and content, and problem solving. And all of these skills are underpinned by the 5th one, which is staying safe, legal, and confident online. So as you can see from this diagram as well, at the heart of essential digital skills are foundation skills. And foundation skills are the absolute fundamentals that everybody needs to get online. And these include things like turning your device on, or using controls like volume, accessibility tools like increasing the font size, or using and interacting with the home screen, connecting to Wi-Fi, updating passwords. Those are all foundation skills. Without them, we can't do anything else online. But what we're going to look at today is the key 5 skills in a little bit more detail. And as we'll see as we work through this, that each skill has a set of tasks that users need to be able to do in order to demonstrate that ability fully. So today we're looking at essential digital skills for work, but this framework also applies to life skills as well. So those skills that we need for everyday life on the internet. We've covered that in a previous webinar, so I'll send that link out with the information after this as well. But the first skill that I wanted to focus on is communicating. So when we think about communicating at work, it is really, well, it is essential, especially because our jobs are becoming increasingly digitized and remote. So virtual communication has enabled workplaces to become more efficient and allow organizations to work across much larger areas. So when I think about my team, I'm based here in Glasgow. I have colleagues that are based in Edinburgh, in Fife, in Inverness. So across Scotland, we are able to work sometimes asynchronously, but sometimes together. It's all about having that digital workplace that we can all communicate through. So communicating skills for work are about more than how we talk to each other. It's about how we work together. It's about how we collaborate, and also think about how we develop and promote ourselves and our own careers. So looking at the tasks here, we've got I can communicate digitally, and that refers to the tools that we use at work to communicate with each other. But there's also a task there around sharing and collaborating. So in my team, we use Office 360 and SharePoint to work together. You might use G Suite, or you might use different forms of collaboration tools. But then there's also, I can set up and manage a professional account like LinkedIn and Indeed. And that is really about how you communicate yourself in this kind of digital community. So it's really all about how we work with other people, how we share and communicate. The second skill to look at is handling information and content. So in digitized workplaces, how we handle and use information is really important. So this skill is all about how staff cooperate with organizational policies, mostly kind of aligned to data security, but also how that contributes to having a safer and more secure workplace. It's about how staff can access the information they need, when they need it, and from the device that they have. So one thing about this particular skill is that trust plays such an essential role in the digital workplace. So employers need to be able to know that they can trust staff to be secure, but they can only do that if they give them the skills to do so. So looking at the tasks here, sharing information in the workplace is all about how we use the right classification on emails, for example, or thinking about encrypting sensitive information and what we post on social media as well. So are your staff aware of what they need to do or how they can follow those policies? That all fits within this skill. But it's also thinking about how we use different devices at work. So thinking about our calendars, for example, I can access my diary from my phone or from my laptop. And it's really about what systems and tools are necessary for staff and can they use them efficiently and effectively. So a really great case study here is Edinburgh Health and Social Care Partnership, who have introduced scheduling software through iPhones to all of their frontline staff. But what they recognized early on was that not all of their staff were going to be confident and competent in using it. So they've developed a digital champions program alongside that. And that's a really key example of how systems can only work effectively if our staff and volunteers know how to use them. And that responsibility sits squarely with employers. So the next skill to look at is transacting. So transacting relates to the use of digital tools for processes like buying and selling and form filling. So thinking about the workplace, it's really important that staff are able to access important documents and follow key processes, and that's including things like making holiday requests or filling out timesheets. Making these systems digital is great and it saves a lot of time and it's very efficient. But again, coming back to that key message, it's only if everybody knows how to use them. So I can complete digital records on behalf of or within my organization. We all complete daily digital records in the workplace. So for example, you completed one when you signed up for this webinar. In the workplace, it can be things like expenses or, like I said, holiday requests or tax returns, ensuring that people feel comfortable and knowledgeable about the systems that we require them to use. It just makes everybody's life easier. But in the digital workplace as well, things like pay slips and tax information are very rarely paper-based anymore. So we probably all use different payroll systems in our organizations, and we have different ways of accessing similar types of information. But how supported are your employees to do that? How confident are you that they are aware of how to find that information when they need it? And a really important question to ask there is, how confident do they feel in asking for help? The next skill, the fourth skill to look at, is problem solving. So problem solving skills are great. They enable us to find solutions to problems that we have. So sometimes at SCVO, we refer to this as the Google it skill, but it's really important to remember that confidence has a big role to play in the ability to problem solve. So if you're not confident using technology, if you're not confident with digital, how are you going to use it to solve your problems? Problem solving is about how we use technology and the internet to navigate not just our day-to-day tasks, but also fix and develop and learn when things go wrong. So thinking about problems that occur in our everyday work lives, so things like laptop issues, or if you can't get a document to format the way that you want, we use things like Google, or if we're fortunate enough to have them, our IT support team. That's an example of problem solving in that digital space. But it's also about improving our own capacity. So improving skills is fundamental, and the internet is offering us a way to do that in a way that is often free. So thinking about platforms like LinkedIn Learning or YouTube, where we can learn new skills and develop ourselves, that is a fantastic example of problem solving. But it's not just developing things that we don't know, it's also making sure that we can use the software that we need to use every day. So that could be things like Excel or Salesforce or those HR and payroll systems that we talked about. Supporting people to be able to use that effectively within their jobs is absolutely fundamental. But the important thing to remember is that digital is an enabler, and it's about making things easier for all of us. So thinking about productivity tools like Trello and Slack, they can make running projects so much more efficient and so much easier. But again, coming back to that key message, only when people know how to use them does it make anybody's life easier. And the fifth skill, the big one, is staying safe, legal, and confident online. So this underpins absolutely everything that we do online. We need to be able to navigate the internet with confidence so that we can stay safe and legal. But this can also be the hardest skill to impart on someone. So thinking about your staff and volunteers, talking to them about online safety can often feel scary and overwhelming if they're not used to that kind of digital environment. But the important thing to remember is that many of us do this as second nature. So when we do things like updating our phones and laptops so that they stay secure, that's an example of staying safe online, or taking care with what we post on social media. Looking for the padlock when we open a new website to check that it's secure. But also ones that I think we're all getting better with as time goes on is being wary about links that we don't trust. I think even people with more rudimentary online skills are getting better at stuff like that. So we all have a lot that we could do to improve our approach to online safety. But I think one of the best ways to look at online safety is to look at your household safety, for example. So things like locked doors and windows are just like passwords. They're there to keep intruders out. We also wouldn't stroll into the town square and start expressing hurtful and prejudicial opinions. So why would we do that on Facebook or Twitter? Contextualizing digital skills is a really, really great way to help people learn and help them think about how digital safety relates to them. So it makes it a lot easier that way. The important thing to understand with workplace digital skills is thinking about where those skills gaps exist. So as I mentioned earlier, this research that came from Lloyd's Banking Group and Future.now gave us a really great insight into where some of those key skill gaps are. It might not surprise you what has come out of it, but it's definitely worth having a discussion about where you can expect some of those skill gaps to be. So one of the biggest skill gaps that we're facing as a workforce is in problem solving. So specifically, that's that task around using productivity tools like Trello and Slack and Teams. Now, one way to potentially explain this is to think about not every job or every role uses a productivity tool like Trello or Teams or Slack, but we will all use some kind of tool. And it's really just about swapping out what you might use in your role with what is described within the task. But it's also thinking about future proofing for organizations as well. So you may not use those tools now, but are you thinking about introducing them in the future? And if so, how are you going to do that if you've already identified that many people struggle with this? The second skill which people struggle with, which probably won't come as a massive surprise to many people, is staying safe, legal, and confident online. So this is a bit of a concern, because what it means is that it's putting everybody at risk. If people aren't up to date with how they should be protecting themselves and protecting their organizations online, then it is putting us at risk of cybersecurity failures. So it's really important to keep that one in mind and think about how you can constantly be improving and supporting people to learn better ways of staying safe and legal online. And the last one is around transacting. So this is interesting, and this comes up a lot. But people have particular issues with accessing their tax and salary information. Now, it could be that this is done on many different systems in different organizations, and that's why it shows repeatedly as a skills gap. But it's also worth thinking about. So can you go to your colleagues after this call and say, do you know how to access your tax and salary information? The whole point is it a big skills gap? Because it sounds like it might be. It's also interesting to have a think about what some of those determinants of low workforce digital skills are. So when we think about essential digital skills for life, for example, the single biggest and most consistent determinant of low skills in terms of life, so those skills that we need to navigate the internet on a day-to-day basis, is age. So typically older people have fewer essential digital skills than other cohorts. However, when we look at essential digital skills for work, that's not the case. The single biggest determinant is industry. So depending on the role you're in and the job that you have, that will determine, mostly, generally speaking, your workforce digital skills, which makes sense. What the data has told us recently is that people in the construction industry are most at risk of not having all the skills they need. That might not sound like a major concern, because when we think about who needs essential digital skills, are we thinking about people who are working on building sites? Not necessarily. But we also have to think about how technology is moving and how those jobs are going to change, but also the different elements of those jobs at the minute. So are they using any form of technology to plan jobs, to order equipment for rotas? And again, looking back, are they able to access their salary and tax information? So regardless of where we think it's most crucial for people to have those essential digital skills, it's actually crucial for everybody to have essential digital skills. And we just have to be aware of that, regardless of the industry or sector that we work in. The second one, and it might not come as a surprise either, is socioeconomic background. So this is the same with skills in terms of life and work. People from poorer backgrounds, generally speaking, are more at risk of having lower workforce digital skills than those from richer backgrounds. So it's one of these things that kind of reinforces some of the inequalities that come with different socioeconomic backgrounds as well. People with a lack of formal qualifications are also at risk of having lower workforce digital skills. And lastly, people with an impairment or disability, there's a strong correlation with not having all of the essential digital skills for work required. And you see this with life skills as well. So people with an impairment or disability are 2.5 times less likely to have all of the skills for life that they need than people without an impairment or disability. So why am I telling you this? What is the point of understanding this? It's really to give a flavor that there are many different elements behind digital exclusion. It's one of those complex and intersectional inequalities. So we need to understand the different layers behind it. It's not necessarily just a case of such and such is a bit of a technophobe, so we're not going to bother. There's so many different reasons that people haven't engaged with digital. There's so many different things that have made it difficult for them. So what are you doing as an employer? How are you supporting your staff to upskill themselves? Because it doesn't just benefit them, it benefits you as an organization as well. So we all need to have a think really about how we focus on making it more equitable. Which kind of brings me to my next point. What is it that we do? How can we do anything about this? Understanding the issue of digital exclusion is kind of half the battle. So knowing what you're up against and being part of the solution is already putting you ahead of the game. And the thing is, there's loads of ways that you can improve the essential digital skills of your workforce. And it really does depend on the people that you're working with and the kind of workplace that you are. But for the purposes of this, I want to focus really on two key things. The first one is understanding and knowing where your staff are currently. And then secondly, knowing what to do with that and what to do next. So thinking about that first one in terms of where are our staff currently, one of the key tools that we use to measure essential digital skills of staff is our Essential Digital Skills Checkup. So the checkup is completely free for organizations to use. It's a powerful tool in terms of understanding how to support and improve your staff's workforce skills. And it's not difficult. I mean, the tool is effectively a survey that covers all of the tasks that we've just discussed and seen within that last bit there. And it can be used to understand where the organization is currently, but also where it needs to be. So getting that key data about skills in your organization is absolutely crucial towards making those first steps towards change. But I suppose the first question is, how would a checkup help? What does it actually do? So thinking about it from the point of view of an organization that wants to make a case for digital inclusion, you can use this to gather data. So if you want to make that business case and want to demonstrate where the staff are in your organization, perhaps to try to influence senior management or to make a case to your funders, then you can use it for that. I'll demonstrate it in a little bit and you'll see what I mean. But it can also be used to baseline skills as well. So if you're developing a digital inclusion program and you want to know what your starting point is, this is a great way to do it. But the flip side of that is you can also use it to measure impact. So 6 months, 12 months, 18 months into this digital inclusion work, what's the difference you've actually made? What can people do now that they couldn't do then? And lastly, we'll see as we go through this as well, but it provides a jumping off point for upskilling. So you can use it to understand where a person's skills gaps are, what's most interesting to them, what is it that they actually want to learn about, and use that to find that who can get them really interested in using digital. But just to have a quick look at what it looks like. So this is the front page of the Essential Digital Skills Checkup. And as you'll see, there are 3 checkups there. You've got your foundation skills. So those were those very fundamental skills that we discussed earlier. You've got your life skills. So that is the skills that people use in their day-to-day life to understand how to navigate the digital world. And then there's work skills, which is what we've been discussing today. So within the work skills checkup, it goes straight in. Each of the 5 skills areas are demonstrated as you go through the survey. The first section is on communicating. And it'll put each of the tasks that you saw as we were going through the skills earlier as a question. So you can see the first one there. I can log in remotely to my email and other work-related communication tools. And there are 3 options that your people can choose from. I can do this, I can partially do this, or I can't do this. And what I really like about how this checkup works is that if your participant says, I can partially do this or I can't do this, a little box pops up underneath, a little tick box that says, I would like to learn more. And that was based on feedback of people are saying they can't do stuff, but we don't know if that's because it's not relevant to them or they want to know more. That will all be fed into the system and you'll see how that's relevant in a bit. But it will give you really a kind of laser sharp focus on the specific tasks that people are missing as well. So you can better understand where you can target the support that you need to target. So pretty much at the end of the checkup, your participant gets this and it's emailed to them as well as they go through the process. They put their email address in, completely optional, that's up to them. But what you see here is you get this really nice overview of where people's skills are at. So you've got your overall score there, 60%, which isn't bad. But that also means that this person is missing 40% of their essential digital skills for work. And down the right-hand side as well, you can see specifically how they do in each individual skill level. So this person we can see has 40% of their transacting skills. So I would be tempted to look at that first and say, hang on a minute, how can we support this person with those tasks within that? When we're talking about transacting, it's those form filling and managing money and using online services. So how can we support a person to upskill in that environment? But looking at this as well, we can also see that they've got 50% of their communicating skills. So that's making me think, if I am in a management position and I want to introduce a new communication platform for my staff, is now the right time to do it? When I can see there are members of staff here who aren't overly competent when it comes to communicating online. So not only does it give you the opportunity to improve people's skills, it also gives you that opportunity to think about future workforce planning and introducing new tools and things like that. But one of my favorite parts of the checkup as well is the curated list of resources that you get at the end. So for every time you say, I don't know how to do that, but I'd like to learn more, the system will pull from our list of really well curated resources for people that like that kind of self-led learning, or maybe just want that quick win to improve a skill on something. So as you can see here, we've got these communicating skills are the ones in blue, for example. So it's recognized that communicating was only 50%. So here are some resources that can support and help them. These resources are checked frequently, so they are up to date, but we always welcome feedback if not. So you can find the checkup at skills.checkup.scot/work. We're currently reviewing it, as we do every year, to see how we can improve it for organizations and individuals. But if you do have any feedback, please let us know. We're always open to hearing it. So that is the checkup. That is you understanding and knowing where your staff are. But then the question is, well, what do we do next? Do we do a skills audit across our entire staff? And that's always a reasonable thing to do next. But what are some of the things that you need to think about if that's what you are going to do? And there are kind of 5 key questions that we've pulled from the years that we've spent working with organizations that do this. And the first question has to be, what's the goal? So why is it that you're doing it? What is the ultimate outcome that you want to achieve from a skills audit? What is the rationale behind it? And how are you going to communicate that to your staff? How are you going to help them understand that this is primarily for their benefit and it's about supporting them as valued members of your team that you want to help? The second question is, how are we going to engage our staff and volunteers? So how are you going to make sure that you can reach as many staff as possible? Are you, for example, going to work with individual teams? Are you going to segment it? Are you going to target it to individuals or specific teams that you know might have issues? Have a think about how you're going to engage and what that's going to look like. The third question there is, will it be anonymous? So sometimes it's important to remember that sometimes people feel embarrassed about what they maybe do or don't know. So it's really worth having that conversation about, is it worth keeping this anonymous, or would you prefer to know who needs support with what? We talked a little bit previously about not all of the questions necessarily being relevant to all of the teams. So the fourth question there is, do we need to customize or make the questions more relevant? So not everybody uses those tools, as we've said. How are you going to make sure that you get the answers that you need, that people understand what it is that you're asking them? And then that last question, the really important one, is what are we going to do next? So once you have your data, what then? How are you going to use it in the most effective way possible? And how are you going to interpret and share it? What is it going to mean to the people that you want to see it? And I guess kind of as we move towards the end of this, that is the question. So what will you do next? And we've got some options here, because we know that knowing where to start is always the most difficult thing. So what you could do is get in touch with us and have a conversation about developing that tailored digital skills audit for your staff. And not only do we offer that audit where we work with you to think about all of those questions that we've just asked, but then help you with putting your digital inclusion plans in action. And the most important thing to remember about this is it's free. But what you could also do is have a think about how you can encourage your staff to upskill themselves. So like I said, we've got those tailored resources at the end of the Essential Digital Skills Checkup. They can be used by anyone if you want that kind of quick win upskilling. But perhaps it's longer term, and you could think maybe a little bit more about digital champions programs. So like our friends at Edinburgh Health and Social Care Partnership, how are you going to support people to develop their skills? Is it more about having a program like that and embedding digital skills across your organization? Or lastly, is it more about targeting specific training for staff where you've identified key skills gaps? So in our example earlier, we saw that the individual had 50% of their communicating skills. So do you just want to focus on that because that is your end goal? You want to introduce this new platform. Entirely up to you. So lots to think about there, lots to think about what you could possibly do. But that kind of brings us towards the end. I suppose the last thing I want to say is just that the Digital Inclusion Masterclasses that we're offering at the minute are really just about expanding or developing your understanding of these kind of key concepts. So essential digital skills is one of the key concepts within digital inclusion, but there's also a lot of other things that we're ready to talk about. So our other masterclasses will be focusing on digital champions, how you bring your organization with you, having a think about how you approach senior leadership about digital inclusion, but also really importantly for our kind of cost of living crisis and how charities are stretched at the minute, is thinking about how we do digital inclusion with limited resources. So you can book all of those events online at scvo.scot/events. And that is it.